Thank you, Cahirla Gurmila Margaret, and to senators here as well. And I move that the bill now be read a second time. The defective concrete block disaster has, as I said in the Dáil, haunted the lives of people in Donegal, Mayo and beyond for far too long. People who built and bought family homes have had to watch those same homes crumble before their eyes, whilst others potentially face that prospect. With no other help available, they turned to the state for support. When the support was introduced, was found wanting, they took their message directly to government through all routes available. We have listened and heard it loud and clear. The scheme that today's legislation underpins is a dramatic leap forward towards a 100% grant scheme. I believe it goes a long way to address the fundamental concerns and, most importantly, the needs of homeowners. I recognise homeowners' concerns and fears, however, and I want to assure them that we are committed to making this scheme work. No scheme is perfect, and I've said repeatedly that schemes evolve, and I am sure this one will too, as the science is developed and learnings are taken. I can assure senators that I will not be found wanting in changes to the scheme now being legislated for if and when they are required. The intense engagement with homeowner representatives over the past year has fundamentally reshaped this scheme for the better. It is a scheme of state support that is unprecedented anywhere else in the world. It is the state stepping up to help those who have found no other way forward. It is a light at the end of a long tunnel for affected families. I want to, Cahirla, this morning pay tribute to the homeowners and to their representatives who have engaged in this process through the working group, through Oireachtas hearings, submissions to the Scsi and the expert group, as well as frequent meetings of the Homeowners Forum. The scheme has has shaped this scheme, and where agreement could not be reached, at least it shone a light on those issues. I want to particularly acknowledge and thank John O'Connor for taking on the role of homeowner liaison and for his hard work and commitment to improving the scheme. I also want to thank my own officials who have worked so diligently on this, along with colleagues in local authorities. In addition, I want to acknowledge my government colleagues from the impacted counties who have been tireless advocates both publicly and more often behind the scenes to press the case for impacted homeowners, not just over the past year, but over several long years. The draft bill today follows on from the general scheme, which reflects the decisions made by government in November 2021. And I'd like to draw attention to the key decisions and differences with the old scheme and highlight the major steps forward. Provision for 100% grant subject to an overall maximum grant of €420,000 per dwelling. That's up from €247,500 under the current scheme. Grant rates in keeping with the construction cost report prepared by the Society of Chartered Surveyors Ireland in February 2022, and provision for a review mechanism for the overall grant cap and a review of the grant rate as required. And this was a particular request of homeowners that I acceded to, that there would be independent costings, which I accepted without change. A government guarantee in regard to remediation works other than full demolition and rebuild through eligibility for a second grant if required for a period of 40 years. So a 40-year guarantee, another very significant request from homeowners which we acceded to. A revised application process which removes the €5,000 to €7,000 financial barrier to scheme entry in favour of a low-cost building condition assessment report. The introduction of an independent appeals process for applicants with all key decisions under the scheme appealable. Alternative accommodation and storage costs and immediate repair works to a maximum value of €25,000. The Housing Agency playing a key role under the enhanced scheme by taking on the financial cost of testing and assessing homes and determining on behalf of local authorities the appropriate remediation option and the grant rate for each dwelling. A new damage threshold to help ensure that the worst affected homes are prioritised. The extension of the enhanced scheme beyond the current scope of principal private residences only to cover rented dwellings registered by the RTB on or before the 1st of November 2021. the inclusion of Clare and Limerick in the enhanced scheme upon commencement, and a pathway for other local authority areas to access the scheme if required through independent research and recommendations to the Minister by the Housing Agency. A review of the operation of the Act 3 years after commencement and within 3 months of any revised IS 465 standard. Exempt development status under planning legislation for remediation works carried out under the Defective Concrete Block Scheme grant on a like-for-like basis. The introduction of a parallel scheme of grant assistance for local authority and approved housing body-owned social houses which are impacted. I want to thank the Chair and members of the Joint Oireachtas Committee, Housing Committee, for firstly facilitating a waiver of pre-legislative scrutiny, and secondly for facilitating such a long and detailed engagement on the 23rd of June with key stakeholders and the comprehensive feedback since received. And I now would like to just briefly address the feedback received. In relation to the damage threshold provided for in the bill, but will be prescribed in regulations, its only purpose is to ensure that damage has occurred to dwellings before they enter the grant scheme, and that the worst damaged homes are prioritised for approval first under the scheme. I want to assure homeowners that the threshold set will not work to prevent entry to the scheme for those who need access. The SCSI cost report was prepared in February of this year and submitted to my department in March, only 4 months ago. The grant rates are being set by reference to those rates, which provide for like-for-like works. The rates will be prescribed and kept under review to ensure that they remain appropriate. The appeals panel will comprise of 10 persons, selected independently of my department through a recruitment process to be run through the Public Appointments Service. All the key decisions under the scheme can be appealed by homeowners, and I can assure senators that the appeals panel will operate independently. Section 29 of the bill provides for subrogation. If a homeowner chooses to pursue the right of action in respect of the damage to their home, then they are free to do so. However, the bill must be framed to ensure that the grant does not operate as a form of double compensation. It is important that Section 29 is retained, as it is so that the state can step in on behalf of the taxpayer to ensure litigation is appropriately managed for the benefit of the public, and this section provides for that. If the litigation is successful, then any damages awarded above the level of the grant would go to the homeowner. There have been a lot of discussion around downsizing over the last few weeks, and I want to make it clear that for a small number of homeowners who have so far expressed an interest in it, downsizing is allowed under the scheme. The grant awarded to the applicant will be appropriate to the size of the home they intend to build, and the grant rates will be adequate to ensure 100% of the costs will be recovered for all, but the very largest of homes on a like-for-like basis. I and the Government have an obligation to the Exchequer and participants in the scheme to ensure that the grants approved are appropriate to the size of the home being rebuilt, and the homeowners rebuilding a home for the same size are grant aided appropriately. Setting up a two-tier grant system with different grants for the same home size would be fraught with problems. The scheme does not financially reward downsizing, but it is incorrect to state that it penalises homeowners who do so. It does not. The Government decision of the 30th of November last called for a number of reviews to be completed to ensure issues of concern were properly interrogated. The review of IS 465 protocol, including consideration of the impact of potentially deleterious material such as pyrrhotite, the review of the Irish standard for concrete blocks, including aggregates, the review of the adequacy or otherwise of existing foundations in homes impacted by defective concrete blocks, the review of potential impact, if any, of full cavity wall insulation on homes susceptible to damage or damaged by defective concrete block. This bill does allow for the Minister to adjust the scheme through regulations to provide for any issues that arise from the scientific investigations, and that includes the issue of foundations. So if it is found, senators, that there is an issue with foundations, I will include foundations in the scheme through regulations. The enhanced grant scheme makes provision for retrospective payment of the benefits to early movers under the current scheme, making provision for homeowners who completed remediation works prior to IS 465 standard, and the grant scheme having been in place is a lot more complex and would need further time for consideration of the issues involved. I'm just conscious, Cahirley, of of time. So just in conclusion, every senator is keenly aware of the scale of the crisis that confronts us. This scheme is the state stepping up to the mark, as we have a moral obligation to put in place practical solutions for impacted homeowners. I can assure you that I will continue to work with all members of the Oireachtas, listen carefully to their views as we put in place regulations and guidance to ensure the enhanced scheme can open for applications as soon as possible. We've waited a number of years, 2 years, since the announcement, over 2 years since the announcement of the previous scheme. We need to move ahead with a new scheme that's going to put people's lives and homes back on track. And that's why the urgency of this legislation is such that this legislation be passed before the summer recess, so we can have a new scheme open in the autumn and new regulations published. I look forward to engaging with senators here today, and we'll make some concluding remarks at the end of the debate.
Thank you.